Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Schumacher. I'm the Senior Director of Content for the Mob Museum. Welcome to the latest public program in our courtroom. And it's such a great crowd. I can see that you're going to experience something tonight that I think is unique. I don't know that you could experience a program like this anywhere else or with any other person. And so it's something to definitely consider as we go through our conversation tonight, that this is a subject that you don't get this kind of insight just anywhere. I want to introduce Dick Charlesworth. Dick is our featured guest tonight, and I don't have a sort of a written bio for Dick because he's not a person who has titles working for companies. He doesn't have some long resume of educational experience that we want to outline. I want to let him maybe introduce himself a little bit, but in summary, the subject matter tonight is Dick's life of crime. And we don't want to soft pedal that. We're not going to make that out like it's a romantic thing. But there's great insights into Dick's life and the activities that he was involved in, and people are curious about these things. So why don't you go ahead and get started, Dick?
Well, let's see. There's people have letters after their names. Like a doctor, or MD, and this and that. Well, I have STCE after my name. It's a small-time criminal emeritus. And I guess I should start with how I started. My father, I'm a third-generation outlaw. Not a shoot-'em-up, bang-bang outlaw, but an outlaw nevertheless. My father was a gambler, and I had a little casino in Lake Tahoe at one time. My grandfather had slot machines on location during the Depression and afterwards, and that's how it all started. That was the beginning of it. My dad was trying to keep me out of trouble by teaching me how to gamble. It sounds funny, but I was a juvenile delinquent. I wanted to steal cars and do all kinds of nefarious burglaries and stuff like that. And my dad says, no. You do life on the installment plan. He says, let me teach you how to gamble. And he says, you'll live a good life, you won't go to jail, and this and that. And that was the case as far as he was concerned, and as far as my grandfather was concerned. But over the years, they changed the rules. When I first started playing casinos, there were no laws against cheating the casinos. There were laws protecting the people from the casino people, but there weren't any laws protecting the casinos from the people. Then they made it a misdemeanor, and then, in the 60s sometime. And then in the late 60s, they made it a gross misdemeanor. And then in the 70s, the mid-70s, they made it a felony. Well, once they made it a felony, and they've given me 10 years for cheating a slot machine, it didn't make any difference what crime I did, because everything was a felony. And I cheated slot machines for 30 years. It was a wonderful life.
Well, Dick, let's go back, because you did say your dad taught you to be a gambler, but that's not exactly what he taught you to do. He taught you to cheat.
Well, sure. Well, most gamblers cheat. I mean, all these guys you see on TV and everything else, they know all the moves. They do everything. They're not all on the up and up. It's okay. It's just the way it is. It's life. So that's what I did. I played slot machines for 30 years and never did any time for it until the end. Then the federal government got involved, and they gave me 15 years for cheating a slot machine.
Dick, but one of the things to that point, I think there was a different dynamic when you first started, right? In the 50s,
Oh, it was
60s.
Completely different.
The casinos weren't quite the way they are today.
Oh, no, they were all owned by guys that had illegal gambling in Idaho or in Chicago or in New Orleans or Detroit or Cleveland or Kansas City. And when they came to Nevada, when Nevada legalized gambling, all these guys wanted to be legitimate, where they could, instead of having illegal casinos in far off places, they all came to Nevada and opened up casinos. In fact, an example of the difference is Ernie Prim, who now they have Prim, Nevada out here, south of here. He came, I think he came from Idaho, and he opened a casino in Reno called the Prima Donna. And when I was a kid, to show you the difference in the time and how the difference in the people and their perceptions and so forth and compared to today, I was in there, I don't know how old I was 19 or 20 or 20, somewhere in that age group, and I was playing the slot machines in the Prima Donna, and I looked over to my right. I was working by myself, and I looked over to my right, and there were two guards at the door, guarding the door. And I looked over to my left, and there was a way out into the alley, if you go to the left, and there was a guard there, and they're all looking at me, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, you know. But it wasn't even a crime. I mean, you know, it wasn't considered a dangerous thing to do, you know. And so all of a sudden, this guy grabs me by the shoulder, and he says, "Charlesworth," he says, "can't you beat any other joint in town? You've been in here 3 times this week." And it was Ernie Prim. But he didn't look at it like I was doing something wrong as much as he looked at it like he was when he was a kid, maybe, or something of that nature, you know. And he said, "Come on, I'll buy you a drink." And we ended up having dinner and became friends for years. And that was more or less the atmosphere in the beginning, but it changed a lot over the years. But so did we. We got better and they got tougher. And you know, I think they should have given me a medal for beating a one-armed bandit, but instead they put me in the penitentiary. I did some serious time, you know.
So Dick, you did a lot of work, as you would call it, in Nevada, but when you were pretty young, you ventured out to Maryland and in Virginia, and you have a story about how the slot machine caper worked there.
Oh, there were in Maryland, they had 5 counties that had slot machines, and I can't think of that. St. Mary's and Anne Arundel and Charles County and 2 other ones. I can't think of them right now. And then there was Maryland owns the Potomac River. So Virginia's on the other side of the river. And so in Virginia, they used to build these a pier out and put a arcade on it and put it full of slot machines, because then it was in Maryland. So I was with a couple other guys, and we got caught cheating the machines, and I got caught. Everybody else got away. I got caught, and so they called the sheriff, and the sheriff can't come into Virginia and get you. He has to come from Maryland and on the river. So he comes in a boat. He's got a little rowboat with an outboard on it, and here he comes, you know, and he comes up and he arrests me and he handcuffs me and he's going to put me in the boat. And I says, "Sheriff," I says, "you know, you can't take me on the boat handcuffed, because if the boat capsizes or something, I'll drown." And he says, "Yeah, you're right." He took the handcuffs off. His name was Bud Young. We became friends over the years, and so we're going across the river, and it's about a 30-minute ride to the other dock on the other side, and up the highway a ways. And anyway, we get there, and it's Highway 301 that runs from New York down to Miami, and it's got slot machines all up and down it, but they're all roadhouses and things of that nature, you know. So we get across there, and as he's driving me up to La Plata, the county seat, to put me in jail, and I says, "You know, I might have done something to those machines on the pier." I says, "But I'm nowhere near as bad as these operators that own these machines." I says, "They're fixing these machines so they won't hit a jackpot," and they were. One bar would come down, the next bar would come down, the third bar would land on the winning symbol, and then it would fall one more symbol down. They blocked the machine off so it wouldn't hit a jackpot. I says, "Those people, I might be doing something to these slot machines, but those people are doing something to their neighbors, people they go to church with, and this and that. You know, that's got to be worse than what I'm doing." And there's a columnist for the Washington Post. His name was Fulton Lewis Jr. He was a nationally syndicated cartoonist and columnist in the Washington Post, and he hated the idea that they had slot machines in southern Maryland. And once a year, he would write a column about it. So I says, if Fulton Lewis Jr. would find out from me that these operators down here have these slot machines fixed so they won't hit a jackpot, then that would be, if that happened, and the sheriff pulled the car over to the side of the road, and he looked at me, and he says, "Where would you like to go besides jail today?" So anyway, I says, "Well, just take me to the state line, of Washington D.C., and I'll be fine." He says, "Okay." So he drives me up to the border, lets me go. I beat the crew home. They had to go all the way around, and I went straight across the river. So anyway, the next day, I was working by myself. I'll go up to Southern Maryland and I'll play some slot machines and make the nut for the day or something. And I go in this bar and I buy a roll of quarters and I play the jukebox, and you need a little noise. And they're roadhouses, they're sawdust joints, as we would say, not carpet joints. And so I play in the slot machine, and I'm looking. There's just a couple customers and me and the bartender. And it looks like it's okay, so I take that tool right there, or one like it, and it's called a shim, and it goes down the coin chute, and you kick the machine out of gear, and then you can manipulate the reels and get a jackpot or drain the tube and so forth. So boom, I go and I get it out of gear, and I drain the tube, and the bartender's okay, everything's okay, so I go get another roll of quarters, and I don't put them in the machine, I wear a sub, I put them in my pocket, and so I go to get the second machine, and as soon as I get the shim in the machine, the bartender hollers, "Hey boy, get that long old city quarter out of my slot machine." and I looked over at him and ready to run or fight, whatever is necessary, and he's smiling. He says, "Come on over, I'll buy you a beer." He says, "Bud Young was in here yesterday, told me all about you. I just wanted to see your act, how you did it,
So Dick, there's one of the things about Dick Charlesworth, he has so many stories, and he remembers them so well. I mean, I have trouble remembering what I did yesterday, but he has this incredible memory. Also, when you were young, you had an incident in Gardnerville when you did get caught, and you ended up in court. What happened there?
Oh, well, there was a little preamble to that, a scene before that. I got caught up at, I've gotten caught a lot of times, but never convicted, but once. And, but I was just a kid, I was a teenager, and I was in Harrah's Club at the lake, and they caught me, and they tackled me, and I want to break the tool, bend it up so they don't know how it works. So I'm wrestling around trying to break the tool and this and that, and they choked me so bad that my eyes almost popped out, and it broke all the blood vessels in my eyes. My eyes were blood red for months. And so they took me to jail at Zephyr Cove up at the lake, a little jail. It looked like Andy Griffith's jail. It was, there are two little cells, and you look out like this, and the sheriff's desk is right there, and he's sitting there, And so they held me for 3 days and nights and didn't let me use the phone or anything because they didn't want me to get Harrah's Club, didn't want me to get any pictures taken of my face. I'm a teenager. I'm not supposed to be in a casino, much less getting beat up in one, And it wasn't it wasn't the casino's rule of thumb or this or that. It was just some out-of-line guards, excited guards, and they took advantage of, well, it was my fault because I was trying to break the tool. Anyway, so I'm sitting there at the bar, on the bars, and this guy comes in and he's talking to the sheriff, and the sheriff addressed him as judge. And "Are you a judge?" And he says, "Yeah, and I said, "Well, Your Honor," I says, "they're holding me in here for 3 days incommunicado. My dad lives right down the street. They won't let me call home. They won't let me do anything." And he started talking to the sheriff. He says, "Is that right?" And he talked to the sheriff. "Get this kid out of here. You can't keep him in jail 3 days, and he hasn't been able to call his family. Nobody knows where he is, and this and that." So he turned me loose right away. Well, the sheriff had my tool, and he had it in his desk drawer, which I'm sitting right there watching. He put it in his desk drawer. So the next morning, I drove up to the lake, parked down the street. I know the sheriff's routine because I've been there for 3 days, and so every morning he goes down to Zephyr Cove for breakfast. So I drove up. I'm waiting for him to come out. He comes out. The jail is right next to the fire department. And he goes down to Zephyr Cove, so I drove right up in front of the jail and got out of my car, went into the jail, got my tool out of his drawer, and went home. And So that was the end of that case. And so about, I don't know how long later it was, maybe 6 months later or a year later, I've forgotten. But I'm in Gardnerville, and I'm working by myself. And I have 3 tools with me: the hook and pusher, the glass gaff, and the belly gaff. The hook and pusher goes down, this glass right here goes straight down, you cock the handle, and it releases the reels. And you can push them around where you want, you push the reels where you want them, and then you hook it, pull the handle through, and all the symbols stay there, and you've got a jackpot. So, but it doesn't work. The belly gaff goes down up here and does the same thing as the hook and pusher from here, and then there's a glass gaff that goes up in here. Oh, none of my tools would work in this casino. So well, I guess I leave, So I'm walking out the door, and by I get to the door, there's a 4-reel nickel machine that pays $250, which is big bucks in those days. And so I think there's another method of cheating machines called the snap-through. And you put a coin in, you pull the handle, let it go, and then when the escalator goes back, when you pull the handle, all the coins move over this way, and then when you let the handle go, the machine goes through its cycle, and then the escalator snaps back to accept another coin. Well, if you just take whoops, it's not a machine. If you just take the handle, if you just take the handle and snap it real quick, you catch a gear going into a dog or a god, I don't know what they call them, any of this, like this, and it kicks the machine, what we term, out of gear, and then you can control the reels through the handle. You can actually move them around the way you want them, and eventually you got the jackpot. So I'm walking by this machine. I think, well, it's a $2.50 nickel. I'll just try the snap through. I put a nickel in. I pull the handle. Got it the first try. Wow, that's cool. But I'm not going to do anything with these tools in my pocket because I don't need them. So I go outside. I put the tools underneath a phone booth outside, and go back in, kick the machine out of gear, and I'm doing my thing, and they jump on me, arrest me, and off they take me to jail. Well, I'm not worried about it because there's no tools involved. There's no evidence that I did anything to the machine other than the fact that they saw me pulling the handle funny. Well, there's nothing wrong with pulling the handle funny. You can pull the handle any way you want, So anyway, I'm not worried about it, but in fact they do charge me, and I have to hire a lawyer, Harry Busher, and so trial date comes, and go to the court and sit in the courtroom, and I'll be damned if they've got the slot machine on a low table like that, and it's there. They weren't big. They were about this size in those days, and so it's a little machine, and they got the table there, and damn, they've got my slot tools there. They found them, they found them outside. So during the testimony, they've got the gaming control board there, an expert from the gaming control board. He's going to demonstrate how these tools were used to beat that machine. Well, I know they won't beat the machine because they don't work. I tried them all, And so how are they going to do that? How is this guy from the gaming control board going to demonstrate how these tools work when I know they won't work? Well, he didn't get a chance to demonstrate yet because the change girls had to testify, and the owner testified, and the guards testified, and it was time for lunch. So we go to lunch. Now, this gaming control board guy, he's about 6'3" or something, great big guy. And so Harry says, well, come on, let's go get some lunch. And I said, Harry, you go ahead. I've got some phone calls I want to make and this and that, and I'll meet you back here at 1 o'clock. So he takes off. So I go to my car, and I get a screwdriver and a pair of pliers, and I wander back into the courthouse. This is Gardnerville 60 years ago, so, it's a little different than it is today. And I go in the courtroom. There's nobody in the hallway, and I look in the courtroom. There's nobody in the courtroom, so I go in, and I pick up the tool, and boy, it just flies in the machine. They fixed the machine so that they will work. Otherwise, why have the expert there, And I try all 3 of them, and they all just, boom, they all just work fine, So, well, that's not going to fly. So the keys were in the machine, so I took the back off. In those days, the back opened and not the front, So I took the back off, and I took the guts out of the machine, and I've got my screwdriver, and I'm tightening up that machine. I tighten up all the glass in the machine and everything. Houdini couldn't get in it, And just as I pick up the guts and I'm ready to slide them in, the door opens behind me. And I turn around and look, and it's the judge. And it's the same judge who was at the lake. It's a little county, the lake and Gardnerville all in the same county, and it's the same judge. His name was Dick Waters. So anyway, he looks at me and he's mad, and then he kind of relaxes for a minute, and then he smiles and just backs out and shuts the door. So, I'm panicked. I don't know whether to run or what to do, So I go out and I get in my car, and I'm sitting there trying to decide, but it's a misdemeanor. It's not a big deal, So I sit there, and finally Harry comes up, and he's, come on, let's go. We go in, and now it's time for the gaming control board guy to demonstrate how these tools beat this machine. So he takes the hook and pusher first, and that's something like this one. And he takes it, and it goes in this glass right here, and he's on top of the machine. Now, he's a great big guy, and the machine is down here. It's not on a regular slot machine stand, it's low, and he's a big guy, and he's like this, and he's pushing and pushing and pushing, and he says, he says, Mr. Charles was really the expert. He could make it look easy, but, and so anyway, he doesn't get that done. So he takes the glass gap that goes in here, and he's like that, and it won't go in either, and everybody's looking at him like, well, come on, what are you going to do? You're going to show how this, So he finally takes the belly gap, that's this one, and it goes up this glass right here. It does the same thing the hook and pusher does from the top, only it does it from the bottom, So, but now he's this tall. The machine's down here like this, and he's like this, and it isn't going. It's not. Houdini couldn't get it in there. Finally, he got his arm around the machine, and he's doing this. And the judge had to turn away. The jury's laughing at him. It looks like he's humping the machine. And so the judge says to him, he says, well, Carl Martellero was the district attorney. And he says to Martellero, he says, well, Mr. Martellero, he says, is that your case? He says, in the first place, they haven't demonstrated that these tools will do anything to these machines. And in the second place, you haven't even shown that they belong to Mr. Charlesworth. During the testimony, it came out that some cowboys and Indians got in a fight outside this bar, knocked over the phone booth, and the security people were there. This is 2 weeks after they arrested me. And, those tools must belong to that kid Charlesworth, And so they bring him into court with the machine and this and that, and they fixed the machine so they would work. So that the outcome of that was this footstool doesn't work very well, and so he says, Mr. Martellero, if that's your case, and my lawyer didn't bring up the fact that they didn't prove that the slot tools belonged to me. He didn't bring that up. I think he was working for Bill Harrah, not me. But anyway. So he said, the case is I'm going to dismiss this case, Mr. Martellero, if that's all is that it? And the district attorney had nothing to say. And he was a young guy, too. He had just gotten out of law school, I think. And it was a big deal. Any slot cheating case in Nevada is a big crime. I mean, big crime for a DA to prosecute. And he was disappointed. Very disappointed, in fact. When I left, I saw some woman had her arm around his shoulder and is not consoling him. But everybody was get up to leave, and the judge looked at me and he said, no, not you, Charlesworth. Stick around a minute, And he says, Charlesworth, you might be guilty of this crime. And if I ever catch you in this courtroom again, I'll throw the book at you and this and that. He was covering his own butt, But but he and I became friends over the years, too.
Dick, so we're kind of jumping back and forth across the country, but it's kind of the way you operate.
Well, I've traveled Route 66 and me.
Yeah. You have an interesting story about West Virginia, and the mob is involved in this story.
Well, a friend of my father's, old Greek guy, I moved to West Virginia because they had slot machines all over West Virginia, and so I'm with my dad and this old Greek guy, and he says, Dick, he says, I'll bet you could go up to Chester, West Virginia, and open a joint, and nobody would know what to do about it. It's all mob run up there. So JoJo was the mob guy, and he was either out of Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, and they had their own casinos there. And whenever they got busted, they would never reopen in the same building. And so they'd always, there was buildings all over the place that they had casinos in and over the years. And when they get busted, they just build a new building somewhere else and open up. So he says, if you went up there and you told the sheriff up there that you had the state handled, he wouldn't know whether you did or didn't. And he says, if he can get the sheriff on your side, he said, then you can go ahead and open up, and they won't know what to do about it. So, well, I was young and ballsy, I guess, and I said, okay. So I went up there and I started looking for a building, and I found this building right on the state line with Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and it was an old mob casino, 2-story brick building, nice building. And so who owns it? And I found out this guy Art owned it. He owned the bowling alley down the street. So I go down and I talk to Art, and I says, Art, he says, I've got the state handled. They're not going to be a problem. I says, can you handle the sheriff? He says, no problem. So I says, oh, okay, you run the restaurant and the bar, and I'll run the casino, and we'll open up. He says, great. So we did. In those days, you couldn't take a slot machine or even a screw or any part of a slot machine or a crap table, a stick, a pair of dice, nothing across the state line. It was against federal laws. So you had to get everything within the state. So I got slot machines, and I had the layouts made in Wheeling, and I had a couple of blackjack tables and a crap table, and over and under table, and some slot machines on the wall, and we opened. Well, the mob didn't know what to think. They thought I was FBI or I had to be something. I mean, who the hell would do that? They would just baffle the hell out of them. So they put the word out that I was a cop or an FBI agent or something, and that was undercover and all this, but didn't keep the customers away because I was giving the food away, and we had ended up doing a good business, and the sheriff used to come in once a week or twice, 3, 4 times, 5 times a month, or his wife would come in and play, and I always make sure she got a jackpot, and the sheriff wasn't expensive. It was a couple of $100 a month for the sheriff. So I lasted about a year and a half, and finally JoJo got tired of me, and he convinced the sheriff to arrest my wife and I. Well, everybody in the room knows the sheriff, and everybody knows there's no secrets up there in West Virginia. And so the sheriff, my wife is dealing blackjack to the sheriff, and he says, well, Nadine, he says, I'm closing you guys up. I'm closing this. And everybody laughs. Nobody knows. I mean, it's just wide open. On the Ohio River, ever since there was people on the Ohio River, white people anyway, there's been gambling there's gambling on the Ohio River today. It's been going on for hundreds of years. So there's so anyway, everybody laughed at the sheriff, but he's serious. So, but he kept playing, and my wife kept dealing, and he kept playing, and he's, no, I'm going to close it up, and so he gets up, and I've got a couple of friends of mine, Ernie Birchfield and Little John, and they're in the club, and the sheriff is going to pick up a slot machine and take it out. Well, slot machines are really valuable because you can't take them across state lines or anything. So we had what's called a Sally Port, I guess, where you have like a speakeasy would have one door you go in and you talk to the security guy, and if you have right, then he'd open the other door and let you in. That's what we had. And when the sheriff took that one slot machine out, John runs over and locks him out of the casino. But they finally, then we took all the machines up to the upstairs to the part of the building that I wasn't leasing. It wasn't on, and the sheriff came in and all the equipment was gone. But he took us to jail. And when they found out who I was, then that was the end of the game. But it was a year and a half of mystery for the whole state. It was fun. It was the whole thing has been fun. I can't tell you how much fun it is to know that I'm going to go into that casino and I'm going to get the biggest jackpot. That's a thrill. Think about it.
Let's. We're going to get back to that topic in a second, but one of the things that happens fast forward a little bit here is. You've been doing a lot of solo work. You've been working on your own. You've been doing different things. But then you get a partner, Don Davis, who is equally infamous, right? And how did that all come to pass, and what did you guys start doing?
Well, my dad had that little casino in up at Lake Tahoe. In fact, now it's Harvey's Wagon Wheel Motel. It's about a mile down from State Line. And my dad, it was called Sky Harbor, and then when my dad acquired it, he named it the Stardust. It was before the Stardust here opened. It was in 55, 56, something like that. Well, my dad's a crossroader, a scuffler, a hustler, or whatever you want to call him, and he's well known from Acapulco to Alaska, Anchorage, and so when he got the casino, all the hustlers that hustled the state of Nevada or anywhere else they have slot machines or cards or dice or whatever would hang around the casino and come into our house. We had slot machines in the back room in the house, and they'd come and practice. And they'd show me, I was a kid, I was 16, they'd show me what they were doing, but they wouldn't show each other. Like one guy was real good at Mills machines, another guy was real good at Pace machines, another guy was real good at Jennings machines. And they all had their own little tricks and things like that, which they wouldn't show each other, but the kid, they'd show. So I've got this guy's secrets, that guy's secrets, this guy, kids, they just absorb things like a sponge, Well, I became the best slot cheater, mechanical-wise, and I wasn't very good in the casinos. That takes a few years of practice, but to learn how to move around in a casino and so forth. But as far as beating the machines was concerned, I was the best. That was my downfall. So anyway, I learned all these things about how to beat it. I learned con games. I learned misdirection. I learned long con, the short con. I learned from all these guys that would come to hang around the casino with my dad and this and that. Well, that's what I learned. That's what I knew. I didn't. My dad says, "Well, obviously you're not going to go to school, kid. What do you want to do?" And I says, "Well, I don't know." And he says, "Well," he says, "you don't want to be a burglar." He says, "You do life on the installment plan." He says, give me a year to teach you gambling." And I already knew a lot from everybody who was just hanging around. And then if you want to still be that kind of a burglar or something like that, he says, "I'll see that the right people train you so that you don't make stupid mistakes." Okay, so after a year of training with my dad, the first thing I learned to do was cheat blackjack. And in those days, you just go to the drugstore and buy a deck of cards. It was the same deck they used in the casinos. And the first thing I learned to do was hand mucking. It was where you hold out a card or introduce your own cards. And I was going to introduce my own blackjack. So I'd go into the casino, the first table nearest to the door, if I had to run, and I'd go to the drugstore, buy or get a deck of cards, and take a blackjack out of the deck, and then I'd sit on third base with palming this blackjack, and when deal went around back to first base, if none of my cards that I have in my hand showed up face up, then I'd drop my cards, pick up the two that were already there, say blackjack, put these in my pocket, and I bet $100. I get paid $150. I walk out the door. $150 in those days was, it would buy you a house. You pay your house payment every month, So that convinced me that being a burglar was for idiots. I mean, you really had to be dense, to want to be a burglar when you can just walk into a casino and they give you the money with a smile.
What about Don Davis? When did you meet him?
Oh, Don Davis. I knew him, because he was one of the guys that, all the hustlers hung around the house all the time and the casino. So Don was. He worked with Benny Binion in Texas. That's how long Don had been around. And so through Don, I met Benny Binion and a sundry of other people, Johnny Roselli and some other people out of Chicago. And I met a lot of people. I was a friend of my dad's was Bill Newman. He controlled drugs and prostitution in Alaska. And when my dad had the casino up there, he knew Bill Newman, and so Bill was a bad guy. He was really a bad guy. But through these guys, I met Don Davis, and Don Davis was he looked like Jack Benny. He looked like this, just but he didn't miss anything. He saw everything that went on in a casino, and he was a great teacher. So he and I partnered up, and he was having a hard time. and I run into him by accident. I was living in L.A. at the time, and I'd come up here and just work weekends, because in those days the town was small. You play the same joints over and over again, sometimes the same machine over and over again, So I just worked weekends not by myself all the time, but most of the time. And so I run into Don, and his wife was working at the Sands. So he asked me if I'd go to pick her up from work, invited me to dinner. I said, sure. I went down there, and I'm walking through the casino, and I walked by this dollar machine, $2,500 machine, and a light struck me in the face. And I looked again, and there was a natural hole in the side of the slot machine, just a natural where the machine didn't fit tight enough, And I looked at it. I beat the machine with a coat hanger, But so I told Don, and so we put up a $2,500 one for a friend of his, a cowboy friend of his, and then I put up another one for his wife, and that's how Don and I started working together. And we had a good time. We beat a lot of slot machines over there.
Well, essentially your crew was Don and his wife, and you and your wife.
Right. There were four of us. My wife and Don's wife, Joanne, and she was gorgeous. Joanne also was my wife, but Joanne was very well endowed. She was a phys ed teacher, and Don was. There's leg men and there's other kind of men. Well, Don was a bosom man, and she was like this, So Don was managing a casino at one time, and she was the head waitress in the casino. Did waited on the crap table and the blackjack tables and things like that, the pit. So he'd gotten word that she was stealing checks off the tables. And he wanted to catch her, and he couldn't catch her. He had other people watch her, couldn't catch her. But he wants to date her. So she's coming up to the bar one day, and she's got her tray on her arm like this with the drinks on it, and there's a drunk over there playing, and he's playing with $100 checks. And Don says, well, if she's stealing anything, she's going to be stealing from that drunk over there playing those $100 checks. So he wants to talk to her. He's going to ask her for a date. And he goes over, and she's got this tray in her hand, and he reaches over and touches her hand to talk to her, and a $100 check falls in his hand. She had a substance on the back of her wrist called check cop. It's made out of beeswax, and it's real sticky. And poker players usually put it on this side of their arm, and they're in the pot any chance they get. They're in the pot. Here you win, or this or that. Anytime they get their hand in the pot, they're breaking off with one check, and they're playing for free basically by doing that. So on the strength of that, he married her. and the one time, a story about Don. Don was a faro bank player. Not many people know what faro bank is today. But you watch all the old cowboy movies and everything else, and they've got a dealer and a little square table about like that. And it's called faro bank, and I don't know how it's played. I don't gamble. But if I play, I'm going to win. So anyway, Don, but it's amazing how many guys that beat casinos one way or another will go into another casino and give the money back. I never could understand that. But Don was that way too. He liked faro bank. In fact, he liked it so much the term in those days was if you were playing a lot of faro bank, you had the tiger by the tail, or the tiger had you by the tail. And anyway, Don, wealthy guy, and he had a beautiful, beautiful home, and tiger everywhere, tiger Chinese rugs, and tiger this and tiger that all over the place, So anyway, he's playing faro bank at the Bingo Palace, I think it was in those days, and so now it's Palace Station. And they had, the faro game used to move from casino to casino. The one casino would get tired of it. They want to put more slot machines in that space or something. But when they close it up, another casino would open up to try and get those customers. And anyway, so it was at the Bingo Palace. And he calls up Joanne. He says, honey, bring me 10,000. Well, Joanne's gorgeous, and she's got a mink coat down to the floor, and she's got diamonds everywhere you can put a diamond, and she's marching through the casino, and if there was a clock, it would have stopped. There's no clocks in casinos, but if there was, the clock would have stopped. Men's tongues they had to pick them up off the floor when she was walking by. And so anyway, she gets to the table, and she's got $10,000 in her hand, and she throws it at Don, hits him in the chest, and it goes all over the table. And then she takes her purse, and she dumps $250,000 on the table. And she says, well, you might as well blow it all. There's no sense in, and you're just taking 10,000. And Don's embarrassed. He doesn't know what he's trying to pick up the money and just putting it in his shirt and this and that. She turns around and she leaves. Don gets all the money together and he goes home, and she's not there. She's not there the next day. She's not there the next day. The third day, she drives up, or she comes in a limousine from the airport, and it's just full of packages. She's been to San Francisco shopping. She says, you can blow your money any way you want. I can do mine too. She had a new mink coat. She had all these packages and everything else. That was Don and Joanne. They were together for years and years and years.
So Dick, one of the things you guys were pretty successful with in terms of beating slot machines was using magnets.
Oh yeah, we used.
How did that work?
Well, I took they started fixing the machines so the magnets wouldn't work. So I read about the Raytheon Corporation had invented a new magnet. It was samarium cobalt, or it was some kind of weird metal magnet. So I took the guts of a machine, out of one of these things, and I built a box, and I put it in there, and I flew to Worcester, Massachusetts with it, and I went to the Raytheon Corporation, and I told them, listen, I've got an invention. It's in this box. I can't show it to you because it's not patented or anything else, but I've got a wire coming out of the box through a little tiny hole, and I says, I want to be able to pull this wire out until it stops, and then I want a magnet that'll stop it from going back in. And they're looking at me like, but they're intrigued by the idea and so forth. So they say, yeah, well, I've got it locked, so they can't get in the box. No, it's a slot machine. And what the wire does, when you pull it out, it winds up the timing mechanism. And if you can stop that timing mechanism, you can pull the handle, stop the timing mechanism, the reels will just spin until they just lose momentum. They'll never settle in or anything. They'll just spin. And then you can take another magnet on the front and just move the reels where you want them. And then when you release the mag on the side of the machine, that goes clunk, 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 and jackpot. So they built me a magnet. It was about this big. And it worked great. Put it on the side of the machine, and that wire didn't budge. Boy, it just stayed right there, so great. So get back, put it in a little itty-bitty purse, a little evening bag about this big. It was just real thin leather, and it was just, my wife used to carry it in a long strap. And she'd put it up on the side of the machine, and I'd move the reels where I want them, then she'd take it off and jackpot. And we'd always have collectors. They won't pay me, They know me. I'd have to sneak in and out of casinos in those days, but I learned to be pretty good at that, and disguises too. In fact, one of the detectives, Lake Headley, he gave me a handle. He says, "We're going to call you Mr. Chameleon from now on, because I'd dye my hair, I'd have a mustache, I'd look like that guy that used to on the morning show had a big." Afro haircut.
Gene Shalit, maybe?
Gene Shalit, yeah, Gene Shalit. I had a Gene Shalit wig that a guy named Iggy in Hollywood did all the stars' wigs and stuff like that made for me, and mustaches. And, because I have 67 arrests. So it wasn't like I was getting away with anything, but I was, but. So most of them in Nevada, they would arrest me on sight. I could be at church with my family. I'm going to jail. But the method in those days, from the police department's point of view, was to force you to leave town. They called it a floater, get you out of town. So that's where all these arrests. They charged me with anything. What happened yesterday? Oh, somebody robbed the 7-Eleven. Okay, charge Charlesworth with it. But they'd never take you to court or anything. They just want you to get you out of town. They'd tell all the casinos, well, Charlesworth is in town, and he's driving an Oldsmobile, and he's this and that, So you'd have to leave town. There's no sense in staying, because when I got here, there were only 7 joints on the strip. In fact, the intersection of Paradise and Tropicana was dirt roads. So it was a little different in those days.
So Dick, you had a couple of interesting close calls with the magnets.
Well, yeah, one time we were coming from Reno to Vegas, and we were stopping in Fallon, and we stopped about lunchtime, and my wife's got the magnet. We're going to put up a $500 jackpot for Lita. She worked with us for years, and so there's 5 of us in on the play. Each one of us gets an equal share, so everybody gets $100 out of that $500 jackpot. So Don and Joanne get 200, Nadine and I get 200, and Lita would get 100. And that's fair because we're all going to go to jail, and we're all, if we get caught and so forth, So anyway, we walk in and they've got a beautiful buffet set up. So well, let's eat first. We'll eat, and then we'll put this 500 up for Lita. So we're all together. 4 of us are together, and Lita's separate. She walks in after us. So Nadine is in line first, and she's got that purse on the side of her arm. And she walks in, she picks up a tray, she gets to the silverware, and all the silverware jumped on her purse. So, oh my God, so now I go over there to help her, and I've got a big magnet in my pants right here, and boom, now the whole tray, everything else comes off, and now we're on the floor laughing, and trying to pull it all apart, and our explanation was her strap pulled it all off and knocked it off on the floor, So we got away with that, and we got the 500. And another time at the Flamingo, they had a $25,000 pot. This is a long time ago too. It was a big jackpot in those days. It was the biggest in the world, and it was right next to the casino cage. And it was and the casino cage is where the guards all would stand when they weren't busy doing something else. And so we're framed up to beat this machine, and we're waiting for the show to break. And so we got the 3 girls, the collector, and my wife and Joanne, and they're playing the machines, and it's right next to the casino cage and the security guy, where the stand where they hang out, and so I've got a bucket of nickels and a Keno ticket in my hand, and I'm looking around, and Don's on the other side, and we're waiting for the show to break, because when the show breaks, the casino fills up with people out of the showroom, and the guards get busy, everybody gets busy, and that's when we're going to work our magic. So I'm standing, and I can look straight down the row of machines where the girls are. I'm far as away as this room from them, or further, and a lady is in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, and she's going down the row right behind going to end up right behind the girls. And there's a guard, and he's standing right behind the girls, but he's this far away, something like that. But when the wheelchair, the motorized wheelchair goes by, he has to step backwards. And when he steps backwards, my wife is just putting a coin in the machine. And when she does that, her shoulder turns like that. And he's so close to her that his handcuffs go boing, like this, they're going out here like this, And he turns around and he looks at the girls, and when he turns around, the handcuffs hit him in the butt. And but he's stepped back to that lady, and so I'm looking to see what the hell's going on, because he keeps looking at the girls, And so finally I realize what is going on. I see the handcuffs out there like this, and I dash over there, and I talk to him, and I tell him, was that Anne Margaret that just walked by, or something like that? And he says, where, and I said, right over there. And he steps away, and so anyway, the show broke, and Don come over, and he says, Jesus, that was close, And anyway, we got the jackpot, and on the way out, I'm talking to Nadine, my wife, and I tell her what happened, and she says, here, you carry the purse from now on. Well, that's not going to work, but anyway.
Well, so you've talked about a couple of things that I think we should clarify or understand about the way you as a group, as a team, you would work a casino. I mean, it wasn't just walk up to the casino like you would when you were a kid and start sticking tools in there. You had a whole strategy involved. So first of all, there's the collectors Can you explain what a collector is?
They won't pay me, and the beauty of cheating slot machines, we could beat all the games. We beat craps, we beat blackjack, we beat the roulette wheel, we beat the big wheel, we beat them all. And I can't beat slot machines today. I've been retired 20 years, and machines have evolved. And if you don't ain't in business on a daily basis, they'll leave you behind. And which happened, I've been left behind as far as that goes. But I could beat the crap tables today. If I told you how we beat the crap tables, you wouldn't believe how easy it is. But it's another story. And I don't want to teach anybody how to beat the crap tables, but it's a fun story. But all the other games, if you're the mechanic, I'm the mechanic, I'm doing the work, and if we're beating the blackjack, then I have to be there when the money changes hands. If we're beating the crap table, I got to be there when the money changes hands. If we're beating the roulette wheel, all those things you see around a roulette wheel, that plastic thing that goes around the wheel like that, that's because of us. They don't leave the ball on the spindle anymore. They used to leave the little white ball on the spindle when they closed the game. They'd put the ball on the spindle. Well, they don't do that anymore. That's because of us. We used to switch balls. We'd put our ball on there, and then with a magnet we could make the ball jump off. Reverse polarity. And whatever it's called. And but with slot machines we use a collector, because they won't pay us anyway. So, and we don't want to be there every day. I mean, how many times are they going to give you a jackpot? They're going to get tired of that pretty quick. So we use collectors all the time. Well, in 30 years, I've had policemen collect for me. I've had priests, doctors, lawyers, mothers, aunts, uncles, kids. I mean, everybody. And in 30 years, I never had one person say, no, I won't do that. Not one person. Everybody wants to beat the casinos. Nobody said, and in 30 years, not one person ever said no. They all said, sure, let's go do it. I had two cops in Southern Maryland they were detectives. They would drive their detective car down to Southern Maryland and collect jackpots for me,
So one of the things that, if that isn't clear, you would recruit or you would find people who would sit down once the jackpot is hit. They would be sitting at the slot, so they would be the winner, and they'd probably get their picture taken with their slot jackpot, and they'd put it up in the casino. I remember they would have a whole board, right? Oh. They would send press releases to the newspaper, because I worked at the newspaper when they did that, and you would get a batch of press releases about the recent winners at
Big jackpots,
Palace Station or whatever it was. And
done.
Yep. And it turns out that you say that at least half or maybe more of these winners that you would see were collectors.
Well, the Flamingo they were the first casino to put more than one slot machine on one jackpot. In other words, they had 100 machines, $100 machines, and they all had just one jackpot, a progressive jackpot. It was so successful that they changed their marquee. They called it the pot of gold jackpot, and on their marquee they had a rainbow and then the amount of the jackpot right on their marquee outside. It was really successful. Well, now you see it all over the place. It's a big deal with megabucks and all that stuff. So first time that we went in and looked at it was $40,000. Well, wow, let's beat that machine and get the 40 grand before somebody else does. There was maybe a half a dozen slot cheating crews in the state at that time, if not more. And so let's get it before one of the other crews get it. So we put it up and went back, I don't know, a week later or something like that, and it was $70,000. My God, we better get it before somebody else does. We got it again. Well, I don't know how long this went on. It went on for a summer or something like that. And one day I was walking in the Flamingo in the door, and you walk in, and first it's the front desk is over here, and the casinos, you got to go through the front registration and everything before you get to the casino. And they had a big A-frame. It was covered with red velvet or something, and then they had all the slot machine recipients that had collected jackpots, pictures of them with the money and so forth on this board. And I'm looking at the board. I forgot it was 10 pictures or 12 pictures, whatever it was. All but 2 of them worked for me. So we decided we better back up a little bit. We're going a little too strong,
So by this time, and I can see we're not going to get to everything on my list tonight, but you're working with the infamous Nick Rash brothers by now.
I recruited the Nick Rosh brothers. They had met a friend of mine, and they were doing some of the same things. But you know, I got off of slot machines, you know, and started doing other things. One of the other things was I could pick the locks on telephone booths, and you would think, well, geez, that's nickels and dimes, and it is nickels and dimes. But you could get around to 40, 45 phone booths a day when they have phone booths everywhere. I mean, you go down Western Avenue or some big street in Los Angeles, and every corner would have half a dozen, you know, phone booths, you know. Well, those little phone booths and the little phones were only this big in those days, and the can inside that holds the money would average $35. Well, if you average that 40 machines at $35 a piece is $1,400. Well, $1,400 is not a bad day's work, and you can do it by yourself. You don't need anybody. So I did that, and so I got into other things, you know, involved in other things, but slot machines were the best. What was the question?
Nick Rash brothers.
Oh, Nick Rosh brothers, yeah. So anyway, the Nick Rosh brothers had met a friend of mine, and they were mechanical geniuses. They were beating telephones also, and this guy says, man, with your guys' casino knowledge and these guys' mechanical knowledge, what a team you'd be, you know. Well, he was right. At the time, I wanted to learn how to open safe deposit boxes, and I'd gone into my bank, and the girl asked me if I was going to be long, and no, you know, she said, okay, I'll come back in a few minutes, you know. Well, as I'm on my way in, there was a little box on her desk, and it was full of safe deposit box locks. Well, you know, in the business that I was in, we became lock experts, open anything. And so I was in the vault, and she left me in there with all these safe deposit boxes, and I'm a lock expert, and I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, geez, if I could open one of these locks, I could look in that box and see what's in it. So on the way out, I liberated 2 of those locks out of that box. And then I'd heard about the Nick Rosh brothers, and so they had flown out from Miami to L.A. to meet me, and we negotiated, and they want to learn how to cheat slot machines. They'd been over to Puerto Rico with another friend of mine and beat some slot machines, and they wanted to learn how to drain the slot machines or this or that, you know. So I said, well, you show me how to beat this lock, and I'll show you how to beat slot machines. That's how we got together. And as it turns out, in the interim, we became a very, very talented crew for beating casinos in Nevada. With their expertise, and they were like bulldogs. They were just tenacious. They would not quit practicing or trying to figure out something until they got it solved. And Don and I, our experience, between Don and me and our ladies, we had 60, 70, 80 years casino experience. These guys didn't know the first thing about a casino or the Bob Griffin Detective Agency or anything of that nature. So we ended up teaching them how to beat the machines so we could protect them, because we know the operation and how it works in a casino. They wouldn't know Bob Griffin if he came up and introduced himself. They would have known who he was. He was a detective agency here in town that they created to stop casino cheats and so forth. You know, never did work.
Well, these pictures were in a Griffin book, was known as a Griffin book, which was his. These are the wanted or the suspicious characters.
The guy on the bottom is Dennis Nick Rosh, and the guy in the middle is Terry Nick Rosh, and that's me on the top. Those are all mug photos, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Nick Rosh brothers, we taught them how to actually beat the machines, and Don and I would make sure they didn't get caught. And it worked great.
So you got caught.
Well, we didn't get caught. We never did get caught. We were ratted on, and you know, they built a case against us. We had one policeman in Orange County, California, that had a vendetta and chased us for 5 years, and he finally convinced the authorities here. First, he came up here. Well, it's a long story. A kid got caught that used to collect jackpots for us. He got caught using somebody else's credit card, and Terry Nick Rosh had beat this jewelry store down in Dana Point, And the girl that owned the it's actually a clothing store, but she was a jewelry manufacturer. It's a long story.
Don't have to tell it all.
Yeah. So anyway, Terry beats the case with the jewelry in it, and the lady sees him and sees the car. Terry gets the license plate. Terry brings I had a house in Laguna at the time. Terry brings the jewelry to me. Then he goes home and they arrest him at home. And we'd beat the Nixon Museum out of the pieces of the wall of China and just a whole bunch of paraphernalia out of out of the Western White House down in Dana Point. And so that made national headlines because of the Nixon Museum and all that. And they were able to settle that. But anyway, this kid that gets caught with this credit card says to and the jewelry thing got settled. Give the jewelry back and we'll drop the charges. So that's what happened. But in the meantime, this cop, Fred Collins, was dating the lady that owned the store. So, and we Nestor Michelina and Louis Berger out of Los Angeles, lawyers, good lawyers in L.A., they negotiated it all, and it was all a wash. Just give the jewelry back and forget it. But when this kid gets caught with his credit card down in Orange County, and he says, listen, if you guys will let me go, I'll tell you guys about some guys that are raping Nevada. They've got shoe boxes full of diamonds. They've got, they're getting big jackpots, millions of dollars in jackpots and this and that. And he says, it's Terry Nick Rosh and his brother Dennis Nick Rosh and the Charlesworth and Davis people, And when he said Nick Rosh, this cop, he was two offices away. He heard Nick Rosh and he jumped up and he ran over there. And anyway, that was the beginning of the end for us because he chased us for 5 years. He threw that kid that was a boyfriend of Terry's sister, Terry and Denny's sister. He had collected some jackpots, so he knew what we were doing and this and that. And he knew a lot of collectors because the Nick Rosh brothers had 2 Mexican girlfriends. And we used everybody they knew in L.A. to come and collect jackpots for us. And so this Fred Collins, he goes around and talks to these people, and they say, yeah, we got a jackpot, so what? Is it against the law to get a jackpot? I go up to Vegas all the time. I get a lot of jackpots. And they held their mud, so to speak. So anyway, this Fred Collins, he's got all these people, and he comes up here to Vegas, and he goes to the police department, and he says, this Charlesworth guy and this Davis and these Nick Rosh guys, they're getting all these jackpots, and the local police just says, yeah, we know, but prove it. How could you got to catch them doing it? See if you can prove it. And he says, well, I got all these people that have collected all these jackpots, and I got this one guy that's telling all these stories. And he says, yeah, but prove it. So he goes home, and he comes back 6 months later, and he's got more information, and he goes to the police department. They say, yeah, but you gotta do better than this, So he goes to the newspapers, and the newspapers pick up the story because these guys are stealing millions of dollars out of the casinos in Nevada, and but the police don't do anything because that's not enough to get a conviction. So he finally goes to the FBI, and the FBI they pursue it a little bit, and in fact they impaneled 2 grand juries, and 2 grand juries came up with no bills. They didn't have any evidence. So until finally one of the Susies, one of the Mexican girls, gave it up, and it wasn't her fault. She was one of those people that if you were talking to her and you said, hey, Susie, like she might pee her pants, she just was that personality, Well, Ruth Cohen was the district attorney here in town, and she had the case, and the lawyer took little Susie into Ruth Cohen's office before the grand jury, and I don't know why he would do anything like that. That wasn't kosher. Anyway, Ruth Cohen threw a stack of papers at poor little Susie, and she panicked and gave up the game. And that's how we finally got convicted, because once Susie started telling everybody, and she was in on the play herself all the time. So then all the other collectors and this and that, they didn't have any choice but they're either going to cooperate or go to jail themselves, so they cooperated. And I don't blame them. They didn't want them anyway. They just wanted me and Don and the Nickrush brothers.
Dick, I wanted to just to put a point on this particular part of the story. I put up this LA Times story about the crime spree, 3-state crime spree. And what I think is interesting about this, I just want to get your quick comment on this. It says a $10 million crime spree by a gypsy-like clan of thieves, ranging, and then it says that most of them are related by blood or marriage. So where did this gypsy-like clan idea come from?
Well, when I was a kid, it starts a long time ago. When I was a kid, some friends of my dad, one of them comes up to me, I don't know, I was 12 years old or something like that. And he says, hey, what nationality are you and your father? And I says, well, I'm Spanish and English. And he says, you're from LA, aren't you? I says, yeah. He says, well, don't give me that Spanish and English shit. He says, you're just one of those Southern California wetbacks. And I said, I am not, little kid, And so from that moment on, my grandmother was Spanish, and so we had a lot of Mexican friends and lived in Redondo Beach, California. But a little funny thing about Mexicans is they hate the Spaniards, and you can kind of understand why. Cortez went to Mexico. He'd go to a village, he'd kill all the braves, screw all the squaws, and put up a mission and move on to the next village. So he did that all the way through Mexico, all the way up into California. And so the Mexicans are kind of down on Spaniards. But by the same token, they look down on the Indians, which they'd all be if it wasn't for the Spaniards. It's kind of weird, So I didn't tell anybody that I was a Spanish and English descent. I told everybody I was a Mexican because I didn't want that problem, So, and just for fun, I one day I says to somebody, I'm a Mexican gypsy. And then I went a little further with it. I said, I'm a Mexican gypsy Jew. And now I'm a Mexican gypsy Jew with a little Chinese and Cherokee. But so somehow or another, this Fred Collins hears the gypsy part of it. And he gets on TV in LA, KTLA in LA, and he does like a 20-minute special on all these slot cheaters that are taking all this money out of these casinos. And he's got a like a tree, this is the one and this is the other, and this that leads over here and this one goes over there, and it's Don Davis and his wife. That's the Las Vegas faction of this crew. And then you have the Nickrush brothers. They were from Chicago. They're the Chicago faction of this crew. And then Charlesworth and his wife, they're the Gypsy faction of the crew. And there's another couple of stories about that, but they're too risque.
Well, so we want to accomplish two more things if we can before we let you go. And one of them is we want to give you a chance in a minute to talk about some of these objects on the table. One thing we need to explain about this is, these are not useful today. I mean, there's no way you could.
You'd have to go to a museum to find a slot machine that those things would work on.
These just so happen to be objects in our collection at the Mob Museum. But before we talk about that, I really want to talk to you about we can laugh tonight about, the stories, and, you say you had a lot of fun as doing these things. But, for a fair number of people, this is crime and it's wrong. You're violating the law. So how do you sort of rationalize this entire life where you've done this?
Well, I'm a third-generation outlaw, so that's all I knew. And my downfall was I was good at it. If I hadn't have been good at it, I'd have probably found something else to do. But I was an expert, and professional in the way we handled our business. We were very careful. We didn't. Other than the flamingo and the pot of gold jackpot, we didn't get. We could beat every slot machine in the world, and so we used to take a car out of any casino that had a car on a jackpot. we wouldn't take it. We could get it every night if we wanted to, you know. But we would wait 6 or 8 weeks before we'd get it. Like we'd take a Lincoln out of the Stardust every 6 or 8 weeks. We'd take a Cadillac out of the Holiday Inn every 6 or 8 weeks. You know, we'd pace it, and you know they'd have time to make some money on the slot machines and be happy. And somebody's got to get a jackpot, you know. One time at the Stardust, we were beating them. Their security system was if a jackpot was hit with the door open, that's what we did that a lot when we weren't using magnets. We just opened the door and put the reels where we want them and shut the door. And they put a security thing on the machine that if the jackpot hit while the door was open, the machine would black out. So we couldn't do that. So we had this tool. It was about this long, and it was real thin. It was a sword, just like a sword. And we would open the machine and then stick that and put the reels where we want them, and then stick that sword through the spokes of the machine, and then close the door before we pull it through. And when you pull it through, then the machine goes through its cycle, but the reels aren't going anywhere because that sword is holding them in place. And when you get the jackpot, it would fool the machine. The sword was so thin that the machine thought the door was closed. Then you'd slide the tool out and lock the door and jackpot. So I normally wouldn't say this to anybody, but this guy, he was an organizer for the UAW in Los Angeles, and I knew him for years, and I could rib him a little bit. And as a collector, I would never tell a collector this generally, but I told him, I said, you know, the Stardust is a mob joint, and you know, when you get this big jackpot, if they suspect it, they might want to intimidate you a little bit. I said, they might throw you up against a wall a few times or something, you know. He said, that just gives me a hard on, you know. So anyway, at that time, Terry whips, we're right across the street in front of the pepper mill, right across the street from the Stardust. And Terry rips his sword out. We call it a harpoon. And he says, man, I hope we get caught. And I said, Jesus, Terry, me the straight man, why would you want to do that, you know? And he says, I just can't wait to scream Zorro and start whapping a few of them, you know. But anyway, the guy got the jackpot, and we didn't get caught. But
So Dick, you served, just to summarize, you served 5 years in prison for both the bank deposit, was it
no, slot machines.
The slot machines. And then later you got caught on counterfeiting.
Yeah.
And that was 7.5 years. Mm-hmm. So,
the redeeming part of it you wanted to talk about, or
well,
something.
I wanted to, point out that you were caught, you served time, and there were some effects of that. Even if you don't necessarily regret your life of crime, you have other regrets.
Well, as a third-generation outlaw, you know, I learned from my grandfather. He had all kinds of paraphernalia for slot machines and cards and dice and this and that, and my dad did, and I stopped it with my life. My children, my daughter right here, and my son, I didn't allow them to get involved in any way. In fact, Don Davis and the Nick Rush brothers didn't even know where I lived for 5 years. Before I took them to my house or anything, you know, I kept my family completely separated. That's the only, you know, my family suffered more than I did. I didn't do hard time. You know, I'm a celebrity in the joint, for Christ's sake. You know, I committed more crimes than all of them combined. You know, if you talk about felonies, I wrote a book. I haven't got it published yet, but it's in the process. And did you guys remember the movie The Passion of the Christ? You know, I'm thinking about the title for the book, and I thought, we'll call it The Passion of the Heist. You know.
This happens to be the name of the program tonight.
Yeah, another title was A Felony Before Breakfast. You know, so you know, my family suffered more than I did. I didn't, you know. I do easy time. What the hell? You do time in your head, you know. In fact, I've been in the rackets all my life, so I'm pretty good at racket sports. I'm a good tennis player, a good racquetball player, a good ping pong player. I play pickleball, you know. But in the joint, I was in Florence, Colorado. There were 1,500 guys there. I was 55 or 60 years old. I'm 78 now. And I controlled the court. I beat everybody, any age, there was one guy finally got there. He was a pro tennis player. He could beat me once in a while. But I remember one time I heard some kids behind me say, "Don't give that old man any breaks. He's tough." Because I had a gray beard and all that, But yeah, the only thing that would maybe redeem me in any way was that I didn't pass the history of my family on to my children. I kept them out of it.
Why don't we go ahead and take some questions from the audience? The way we do this here, if you haven't been here, is we have a microphone that we want to bring around to you before you ask your question. And I'll just call on you. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we can start here in the front.
A question regarding the collector that you mentioned. The collector would collect the jackpots. What did you go in as the mechanic and set it up, and then they pull the one arm bandit, and
Yeah,
they collect? How did that work?
I would put the jackpot up, and I could put the jackpot up and be 5 paces away before the bells would go off and all that, And then the collector they wouldn't see any of the crew. They when the bells go off, they look and they see the collector standing there and pay the collector. And we all got an equal share. We didn't, everybody got the same
So
amount.
in other words, there was a delay in between the time that you
Yeah.
set it up and then
Right.
okay.
Just a second or two, not long, but we were always able to move away. One time I was in the Flamingo in the old days, and we're playing a Jenny's machine, and they were a little tough to handle. The springs and all vary, and I think reasons for their being tough. And there's three guys playing me and 2 other guys playing the machine, and there's a little Jewish lady on the right side of the other guy right here, and she's only this tall. So he's got his arms up trying to block her view and everything, but she can look right under his arms, and she sees me on the machine, and so I could see that she sees what I'm doing, and I look at her, and she smiles, and I smile, and I ask her, "Are you having any luck?" And she says, "No," and I said, "Well, this is the only way I know how to win." And she just grinned from ear to ear, Well, in those days, a dollar machine paid $150, and there was 50 silver dollars in the jackpot glass and a $100 bill. And when you hit the jackpot, it all would fall in the tray. So I finally get the jackpot up, and the guy on my right's going to move over and collect it. And all right, here it is, and I set it in, and then I turn and I walk, and he moves over in front of the machine, and just as the money fell out, the little Jewish lady reaches over and grabs the $100 bill and takes, "Thank you, boys," and takes off.
We have another question here in the front.
Can I follow up? Just one more question in regard. Sorry, just one real quick.
Very quick.
Did it stop did you stop when the machines went electronic?
No, in fact, the big jackpots that we were getting in 6 and 7 figures, we used to change the motherboard. We had a guy from Silicon Valley that lived at Lake Tahoe, and we'd take him a machine, and he would go through the machine. He'd take the motherboard and build us another motherboard exactly like it, and the machine would play just like it was supposed to, except it would never hit a jackpot unless we programmed it to. Now, it's a binary code. 1 coin would be a 0, 2 coins would be a 1, and we had a 100-digit code, easy to remember. A 1 coin, 2 coins, 2 coins, 1 coin, 2 coins, 2 coins, that type of thing, And my wife would put in I'd ask you, "You want to collect a jackpot?" And you'd say, "Yeah, I'd love to collect a jackpot." And I said, "All right, check into Caesars, join the slot club, get a card. Here's $3,000. Play this machine until you lose all the money. Have some fun, buy some drinks, tip the girls, have a good time. But we're getting you into the computer. And tomorrow at 7 o'clock, come and start playing this machine. Now, you must put 5 coins in every pull because we don't know when the room is going to be right for us to work our magic." He doesn't know that we switched motherboards 3 months ago, and we can program the machine to hit a jackpot anytime we want to, without any tools, without anything. It's just so sweet. And so So next afternoon, next evening, at 7 o'clock, he goes out to play the machine, and there's a woman playing it, and she's putting in the binary code. As she's playing it, she looks over at him and she says, now, when we get a collector, he doesn't meet the whole crew, he only meets whoever recruited him. So let's say this guy knows me. And so he doesn't know the girls, he doesn't know Don or the Nick Rush brothers, or he just knows me. And so he comes down to play the machine, and somebody else is playing it. Well, Don's wife is putting in half of the code, and my wife puts in the last half, and she looks over at him, and she says, "Are you waiting to play this machine?" And he says, "Yeah, I'd like to play it." And so she says, "Well, remember, if you want to hit the super jackpot, you got to put 5 coins in every pull." Well, now maybe he wakes up a little bit, that maybe they're in on the play or something, But anyway, now the girls have got the code in, but it's programmed not to hit until the 437th pull. So he starts playing it. He doesn't know what we're going to do or anything. He doesn't know how it's done or anything else. And he's playing it. On the 437th pull, he gets the super jackpot. Well, the security goes wild. They come down, they want to open the machine, look for holes or this or that. They take the machine apart, they're looking for anything to see if there's anything nefarious going on. And they don't find anything. Oh, well, maybe we better run the film back. We'll go look at the film, see if there's been a crew around the machine or anything like that, They run the film back, they see him play the machine for an hour, and finally they watch him put the money in, pull the handle, bing, 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 jackpot, the bells all go up, pay the guy. Oh, it was sweet, man. It was so sweet,
Let's take a question over here.
So this is a prime example of there's two sides to every story, the mission of this museum. I can see that the excitement in your face is still there, which means that you're an adrenaline junkie when it comes to doing something dishonest. And I just wondered how you satisfy that adrenaline rush today in what your everyday life is, number one. And number two, I wondered if you knew Douglas Barr, who did get put in the black book for his slot cheating, and whether you have any thoughts about why you weren't put in the black book.
Well, let's see, the first question was why I'm not in the black book was because I've been underground all my life. That was the last question. What was the first one again? Adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
What do I do now? I'm old and cold, man. I mean, my days of that type of hustling, or I call it liberating. I liberated the coins. I liberated the money. I've done a lot of things in my life, but I've never used a gun. I've never used extortion. I've never done any violence. I don't rob little old ladies. I don't. And that, there's no doubt about the adrenaline rush. It's a thrill. Believe me. I mean, it's work. There's a lot of preliminary work. You just don't walk in and do it. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of, we prowl. I used to prowl the casinos, daily. We watch for weaknesses in the casino. They'd be changed, the security cameras are all there and everything else, but they'd say, well, we're going to move these machines over there and we're going to do this, or here we do that, but they don't change the cameras. So you look for weaknesses in the casino. And there's a lot of preliminary work to that, in that regard. Now I just haunt the casinos. I'm not in the black book, but I do like to go in and look, and they're easier to beat today than they've ever been. They really are. They've got these machines that are 8 feet tall. They can't see through them. And the people that are in the casinos that are working there, they've learned their trade at school. When I was beating these joints with these machines, and I was going up against mob guys that had their joints that used to beat, run illegal games. They knew all the moves and everything else, and to get over those guys, that was a challenge. And it was an adrenaline rush, And, I knew a few mob guys, and they were never angry about it. They just wanted in on it. They all wanted to move money out of the casino, and any way they could. So I had offers from them, but I had some good advice as a young man to stay away from the mob. I have used them once or twice, but I always paid for it in gold or cash. And so I was never indebted or in any way or this or that. And they often would like to get in on it, but you avoid them like the plague, to tell you the truth, you know.
Do we have another question? All right, very good. Well, why don't we wrap it up right there? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you'd like, Dick and I will hang out over here, and we can, if you're interested in these devices, we can talk about them a little bit and kind of show.
Sure. Any questions?
They're relics, you know. So
There's some of them are really cool. This thing right here. The Mob Museum thinks that our hands will hurt these things. Believe me. This thing.
they will.
This thing is called the Garner gaff or the L or the spring. It has several names. Bob Garner is the guy that invented it. And it's shaped in certain ways. It's bent right here this way. This thing, it's so complicated you can't believe it. It would go, if you were going to the front of the machine, it would go in here, and then it would go in this little space between this is the guts of the machine and this is just the case. It would go up, and then it would go this direction. It would bend. Oh, I can't touch it. They get mad at you if you touch it. So then it would bend here and go that way. And then there's a little leather pad back here. And it would hit that leather pad and bend up. This thing went like this, like a snake. You know, and I'm good at these things. I mean, I can, you know, I used to wear like this quarter shim. I'd wear it under my watch band, and I'd have a quarter in my hand, and I'd grab the shim with my finger like that. I'd go up there, put a quarter, like I was putting a quarter in the machine. The shim would go in, bang, I get it out of gear. You know, I mean, but this thing was tough. I took 2 hands for me to use this one. Kenny Graham, another slot cheater, I swear to God, he could sit at the bar and throw it at the machine. You know, I don't know how he did it. He just walk up one hand, bang, boom, he couldn't get it out of gear. But
What do you call each of these?
that's a shim. This was for Mills machines and Buckley machines, and it would go down into the coin chute, and it takes the place of a coin actually, and you would kick the machine out of gear and put the jackpot up. This thing is called a Jennings shaker, and this won so much money that the old Frontier hired Pinkerton to come and figure out where all the money was going. You know, but they didn't figure it out either. But this would go up in the coin chute and take the pay slides, and you could move them back and forth like that. They just keep dumping coins. You know. And you'd be surprised, those coins add up.
All these different devices were made by the crooks.
By us, yeah. Well, no, not by what?
By people like yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so how would that work? You'd bring slot machines over to the house?
Yeah, we'd buy slot machines and figure out how to beat them. This coat I'm wearing right now, it's a double vented coat. Well, this machine, when Bally first came out with this machine, there was a little tab on the side here that when the engineers designed the machine that was supposed to be bent up when they put the machine together. But the engineers didn't tell the manufacturers about that, so they just looked at it and put it together without bending that tab up. Well, it was a natural hole right there, and you take a wire like this, and I put my tail of my coat, I'd put it in the tray for the coins, and then I'd take this wire and stick it in right here with my and I have my crew, you know, whoever it was at the time, you know, excuse me, and I'd stand there with that wire and I'd stick it in that hole and turn the wire a little bit. It would cross 2 points, and the machine would just start emptying its money out, you know, but my coat was in the tray, so it didn't make too much noise, you know, and then when I got all the money out of the machine, a quarter machine would hold about 300, and then I'd step away and move over, and then that person would step over and pick up the money, and I'd be doing this one, you know, go to the next one, you know.
I just remember, Jeff, you had asked about a specific individual. Douglas Barr, does that ring a bell?
No, I didn't know him. I didn't know Douglas. In fact, in 30 years, well, I've been in Nevada since, 60 years I've been here. And I don't know anybody.
Didn't want to know anybody. Especially casino people, because if they get any trouble, they give me up to get out of trouble. So we used out-of-state collectors most of the time. Whenever we could, we'd try and get people from out of state, out of the country, even better yet. No taxes, no forms, or this or that, And we were very careful about that. We made sure that that taxes were paid when necessary, like on the big jackpots when we were getting into 6- and 7-figure jackpots. We would withhold the taxes. And when tax time came, we'd be in touch with the collector and make sure that money got paid, because we didn't want him to be in trouble and then say, well, I didn't get all the money. I only got some of the money, or this or that. So we tried to cover all the bases. I had a judge tell me one time, he says, Charlesworth, you are I forgot what did he say, and a menace to society. You're a professional criminal and a menace to society. And I said, well, Judge, you're half right. I've not been a menace to society. I don't rob little old ladies. I don't, I take money from casinos. I took money from AT&T for many, many, many years, until they ran out of phones. But they had to change the locks all over the country because of us. Where they had the 30A, then they had the 30B, then they had the 30C, then they had the 30D, and they'd have to, those locks are expensive. They're very well made, I mean, there was people try to muscle them open with crowbars and things of that nature, and couldn't do it. But little picks would do it, And so I told him, I says, you're right, I'm a professional criminal, but because I'm a professional, I'm not a menace to society. A menace to society would be the drug companies, the tobacco companies, the liquor companies, politicians on the take. There's a whole lot of other things that, Bernie Madoff, not that I wouldn't have done that if I knew how, but anyway, so I was never, in my mind, I was never a menace to society. I took care of my family, I took care of my friends, and I didn't. I'm not a junkie. I'm not a I don't do drugs. I don't well, sometimes a little bit, but not much. I do drink.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.